Hello, everyone. Welcome to Ask Vivaldi, our live streaming series where we answer your questions about growing your business in the 21st century. I'm Larry Lucas. I'm a senior partner with Vivaldi. Hopefully you guys didn't join just to see Dave Burse, our usual host, with his great English accent. You're stuck with me, but we got a treat for you. We're going to be talking to Danny Hest. He's the CEO of TOGO. Hear more about that in a minute and how his company is starting to really think more horizontally to redesign the future of his business. As I mentioned, the show is Ask Vivaldi. So put your questions in the chat box. We'll try to get to as many of those as possible moving forward. And I'm pleased to say that we are going to be joined in this conversation with my partner in crime and colleague, Tom Ajello. He's our Chief Creative and Digital Officer at Vivaldi. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Good. How did you get a better photo in that intro video? Looks like
I took it 6 years ago. And I've not updated it since, and don't plan to. Tom, you and I have spoken over the last 6 months or so that, companies, especially with COVID, have continued to kind of focus narrowly, and in some cases struggle, to be honest. And some have started to think more horizontally to really kind of redesign their business for the future. And the TOGO Group is one of those, and they're really changing the game for both new as well as experienced RV adventurers, right? Especially now that there's some unprecedented kind of renewed interest in the RV lifestyle that I think is here to stay. And with that, I want to introduce our guest, Danny Hest. He's the CEO of TOGO Group and a friend of Vivaldi. Prior to his role at TOGO, Danny was the SVP and GM at Global Partner Solutions at Expedia and VP of Business Development and Product Marketing at Orbitz. So he's got great wealth of experience. Hey, Danny, how are you?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me today.
Oh, we really appreciate it. Really appreciate it. And, Tom and I are very familiar with your business. We've had the opportunity to work with you and your team over the past year. So know a lot about it, but thought for the audience, maybe just take a few minutes and just kind of share what the TOGO Group's all about and kind of your vision for the future.
Well, first of all, good morning. If you're like me, you're probably in a little bit of an election haze. So I'll do my best this morning on a few cups of coffee. So TOGO Group is a startup that is focused on trying to create the best possible digital experience for road-based travelers. And we have a particular focus, as you mentioned, Larry, on RVers and on outdoor tourism. So we have three primary offerings. We have an app called Road Trippers, which has been around for a while. Road Trippers plans about 1.2 million trips per year. And it works a little bit like a triptych, like a modern day AAA triptych, which I used to use with my parents to plan our family trips. Much more modern experience. We have a new RV experience app called TOGO RV, which encompasses elements of Road Trippers. And then we also have a B2B content creation agency called Road Trippers Content Studio, which does a lot of great work in the outdoor travel marketing space. So that's the way our company's set up today. And for me, I've always been really fascinated with the steady growth of the outdoor leisure travel space,
right,
and the camping space. And it's now grown with the RV industry. It's chugged along to over 11 million households just in the US. And while I wasn't an avid RVer before that, I've taken multiple trips now.
You better have.
Yeah. Well, there's nothing like using your own software to realize all the opportunities there are to improve the digital customer experience for users. So we've been on this pretty deep journey to try to make things better for RVers and for campers.
Well, that's terrific. And, this series, it's part of our Interaction Field series, kind of a platform business where you guys are kind of bringing all the different participants together. And it sounds like from the way what we know about the business, what you described, TOGO really is an interaction field business, right? Similar to even LinkedIn. So if you think about LinkedIn, started out as more of a kind of network of online resumes, and now here we are in a LinkedIn kind of live streaming series. So they continue to find pain points and opportunities to kind of grow their business. And I see you guys in a position to do that as well and really be a conduit to all the participants within the RV ecosystem as well, right? How are you and your team starting to think about addressing kind of identified pain points, opportunities to really make the experience better for the RVers out there?
Yeah. So good question. So I wish I could say that I could have seen the post-pandemic or the current pandemic, travel shifts coming. But we've seen this huge explosion in road trips, and in particular in RV trips this year due to the pandemic. There are a lot of reasons for that. Being outside, being able to socially distance, you can control a lot more of your surroundings. You can cook your own food. Don't have to stop at rest stations. So there's a lot of reasons that this lifestyle becomes appealing to travelers. And then we're seeing that show up in the rental industry, which is booming right now for RVs. The sales industry is also booming. Shipments have actually never been higher. And we think that creates a huge opportunity to help people have great experiences that kind of match their expectations when they come into the lifestyle. And so our vision has really evolved to try to encompass much more of the life cycle of customers that are considering taking a trip, considering purchasing an RV, and then trying to meet their expectations as an owner, and then so on. So that includes a lot of things. That includes things like helping them plan their trips, which we try to do with road trips and making that much more RV friendly. Connecting with others on the road. RVing can be very lonely, and the ability to actually make connections socially with people on the road is really important, we think. We want to be a good companion and support tool during their trips, and then help people share those experiences and then do it all over again. So as you mentioned, I think our vision has gone from let's talk about all people that take road trips to let's really focus on this more narrow segment, and then see how deep we can get in solving problems across a number of different areas. Yeah,
it sounds like almost like shared value for all the different participants across kind of the entire consumer journey. As you've talked to some of the partners or even renters or owners, how do you ensure that they're willing to kind of collaborate for a better experience, right? Versus kind of thinking more single-minded in terms of their transaction versus a more of a shared interaction?
Yeah, well, the way that I like to think about it is that as we're introducing new features, we try to make sure everything has some sort of equilibrium. We look at it as trying to make sure that we maintain a balance at all times of the shared value, given being very realistic where we're at and what our product offering is at the time. So, for example, we have partnerships with campgrounds. If we were to look at that as a zero-sum game and very transactional, and not really drive more value than we're asking of those campgrounds, we would risk a long-term sustainable partnership with that campground, which is really what's more important to us in the long term. Same thing with customers. If we charge too much for the services that we offer today, then I think that erodes some trust and is more difficult to build it out over time. So as we test and learn with new features, as we add more users to our platform, of course that can evolve. We're going to continue to try to solve bigger and bigger pain points, but we have to be realistic and take the long view. I think that's the first.
Thing I think that's smart. Very smart.
Yeah, I think the other thing I just mentioned is that I was taught, kind of coming from a partnerships background. I remember sitting in the training session. The professor said you have to give a few drops of blood to extract a pound of flesh. And that always stuck with me. I think that's a little dramatic and a little dark maybe, but the metaphor I think is a good one. In that I think it's really appealing to create businesses that have shared value and that are set up to drive long-term sustainable growth for all the participants. So that's what we're trying to do now.
Yeah, we talk a lot about what you just described as collaborative advantage, right? This idea that the annals of brand and business strategy have been built on this idea of category thinking and competitive advantage and defining yourself by the walls of your category. When you Larry mentioned you as a horizontal thinker before you entered the call, and this idea of horizontal thinking really is about building collaborative advantage as the key differentiator for your business. I'm curious, along this idea of horizontal thinking, or not defining your business by the confines of its category, reaching outwards, looking outwards. As you start, if we could think maybe structurally for a second, right? As a horizontal thinker running TOGO, I move a little bit horizontally. I find campgrounds. I move maybe a little bit horizontally than that, right? I find Walmart on the way to the campground, right? I move maybe a little more horizontally than that. And then I start looking farther out on the, let's call it the frayed ends of your interaction field. How do you make sure that your team is constantly looking wide, thinking wide, right? Through the lens of not just the category, but everything that's happening around it.
Yeah, that's the trick, right? So I think it's a combination of trying to execute really well on what we're focused on at the moment, but also be really, really good listeners and be very attuned to social chatter in the marketplace. We have our own user experience research. We do a lot of research ourselves and make use of third-party research. So we try to really set that up to be a core muscle, and we're constantly challenging our own assumptions to say, like, hey, do we really know this, or do we think we know this and we have to test this and learn a little bit more? So I think it's a balance of trying to understand the whole ecosystem out there, trying to evaluate all the opportunities. And it's a little bit of an order of operations as well, to make sure that you're focused on the right thing. You can't be focused on everything. Our eyes are often much bigger than our stomachs, and we've also made some really hard choices and deliberately chosen to not participate in certain areas at the moment because they'd be distractions for us. So we're trying to be smart about which things we try to tackle first, be very disciplined about that, and then also be really good listeners at the same time to make sure we're not missing anything.
Yeah. What challenges in your time at TOGO have you encountered that you guys have been able to overcome or still looking to overcome? Curious.
I'd say that the biggest overall challenge that we've noticed in particular in the RV industry is that the participants are really, really good at manufacturing, really good at selling. And they've had a lot of success for a long time. But really beyond the sale, there's been surprisingly little focus on the customer, ensuring that the experience is a good one, and then trying to learn from it and improve upon that experience. Comparing that to the auto industry, I think this industry is not nearly as far along. It's really the early innings of that. And so I think that creates opportunity. I'm an optimist, and I think that we're in a very unique position to solve some of those problems. But getting the right kind of attention, right now, most RV manufacturers and dealers, as they should be, are focused on trying to meet this huge demand spike.
Right.
They're very cost focused. So trying to talk about future ideas can be a little bit difficult to break through some of the noise, but we're making some slow and steady progress on that.
You mentioned this ecosystem that you've built, right? You've got road trippers, you've got a content studio, you have a group of businesses effectively within the business. I guess why that structure, and what's next? Are there if you could give us a taste, are there more acquisitions? Is there more consolidation? In order for you to continue to meet the horizontal demand, what does that mean for you in the future?
Yeah. So with every new feature and every new pain point that we're trying to address, for us, and as with most companies, it's a build versus buy versus partner decision. We have constrained resources just like anyone else, but we also have great investors that are willing to look at acquisitions. And I do think there'll be some consolidation in the industry as people start to pay attention to the space a little bit more. Again, very early innings to this. But for us, I would say we're really mostly focused on building and partnering and opportunistically looking here and there in an acquisition. Give you a few examples. We are really close to rolling out, I'm very excited about this, a few features, one of which will help you, if you're driving a 30-foot RV, navigate and avoid a low bridge, due to a tunnel or due to a road overhead, or not wear out your brakes on a huge steep incline when you're driving something that heavy, which we think is very important for safety, and Google and Waze are not focused on this right now. We also think that finding service is really difficult when you're driving an RV. Service centers can be backed up. Getting the right part can be challenging. And sometimes you actually need service where you are, not where you bought it. So we're looking to solve that problem in a bit of a unique way. And then, as I mentioned before, trying to connect other users with each other so that they can learn from each other and share experiences. those are all things on the near-term horizon for us. And we're looking at doing that primarily through building and through partnerships.
So you mentioned this built-in community of users, right? And I'm just curious how you guys plan to use kind of either the power of word of mouth and the advocacy of users who love the experience, and how you can use that potentially even to get more awareness and consideration into the industry as a whole, right? The lifestyle as a whole, given kind of the situation that we find ourselves in.
Yeah, so breaking that problem down, we think the biggest opportunity and maybe the biggest risk for the industry is this flood of new RV owners and new RV renters that are coming in and have a certain set of expectations.
Mm-hmm.
And we feel not just an opportunity, but a responsibility to make sure that they have a good experience. And if they do, we think that word of mouth will be very, very strong, not just for that experience, but also for the tools that we provide to help that. So other things that we're focused on, we're trying to empower people with tools to learn about how to operate the vehicle themselves. It can be a little bit daunting when you're starting. It's actually a barrier to buying or to renting. The first time I had to convince my wife that we were going to take a trip, I had to show her about 20 different YouTube videos before she blessed it. So I think
she wasn't sure you could handle a 30-foot RV is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. And I proved her wrong, but it took a lot of Googling and YouTube research. So there's a lot that we can do, I think, to make these pain points.
That's real friction. I'm going to take the bait on that and maybe call your wife an influencer effectively. And so, if I think one of the questions in Larry's question, we had one in the channel, is how do you leverage the power of influence? How does social currency and gravitational pull become something that you need to identify and take advantage of? I'd be curious what's happening today in the business with that regard.
With social and gravitational pull.
Yeah.
So I would say just generally there's from a social perspective, there's lots of community building on tools like Facebook, on Instagram. There's lots of YouTube videos, obviously, and then there are some industry-specific platforms like Our Village, for example. So what we're trying to do is to really carefully listen to those conversations. You can learn a lot by reading a forum about owner satisfaction, about these pain points, and then we're trying to figure out, how to learn from that, and then also how to insert ourselves tactfully in the conversation where it's warranted, so that we can be part of the solution. I think there's a really strong gravitational pull towards it very naturally right now. The industry just has a lot of tailwinds. And the trick, I think, is to keep that going. And the way to do that is to make sure people continue to have positive experiences with it. And it will naturally kind of fan that flame.
One thing we've talked about, I think it's okay to talk about this, Danny, but is the idea of other people's social and recreational lives, right? In and outside of RVing in general. It's interesting. One of the reasons, again, a horizontal idea, I guess, but one of the reasons I love this industry and talking with you so much is how many adjacent industries and therefore influencers and marketing opportunities, connection and social opportunities that live, right? For every RVer, there's a mountain bike. For every mountain bike, there's an ATV. For every ATV, there's rock climbing equipment, and there's a craft beer brewery in the back of one. And that's really fascinating to me in terms of just how many places you can go. I could imagine that being difficult as a team to decide what horse to bet on and where to put your time.
Yeah, of course, it creates great opportunities. As you said, it's always a challenge to figure out what to focus on first. But I think you kind of hit it on the head. There's so much opportunity to introduce people to this lifestyle, to make them see how it could be compatible, get them to try it. And for us, I think the trick that we're trying to get really good at is learning more about the customer, treating it as a potential lifelong customer, and not so much short-term thinking. Treat vehicles as if they have a life of their own, and that they need to be maintained, they need to be serviced. When you go to sell them at a certain point, it would be useful to know how well they've been kept up. That doesn't exist today in the RV industry. And then also help people do the things that they love and take more trips. So, those are all big challenges in terms of what to do first, because there's so much opportunity.
Okay. You know, I mentioned your past experience, Danny, at both Orbitz and Expedia. What have you been able to take from, you were really at the forefront in terms of kind of platform kind of thinking and business models. What have you been able to pull from that past experience and apply it towards your TOGO experience?
Yeah. So first of all, I'll say that I've been really, really lucky to work under some great leaders at both Orbitz and Expedia. I tried to learn as much as I could from them. Things about, trying to build a positive and inclusive culture, bring in a really great team, hire a great team, and then kind of get out of their way to help them do their thing and build great products. And then how to scale something when it gets some traction. And then, what I'd say is just putting some of that practice in motion. One of the things that I did when I first got here was try to take audit of what was working and what wasn't working, because we were doing about twice as many things as we are today. And it was a bit painful, but we actually decided to exit some of the initiatives that we'd started. At a telematics business, we still have software for telematics, but we just decided that we wanted to be much more customer driven, customer focused, than to be a B2B business at this time, because there were lots of telematics players at that time. I could go down a list of things that we decided not to do. And I think learning from the people I worked for at Orbitz and Expedia, trying to figure out what to focus on was really important.
Yeah.
I think the other main thing that I call out is that the best leaders I've seen do it have this kind of uncanny ability to be super broad and to be able to see the business and see opportunities and risks around the corner. But then they're also not afraid to roll up their sleeves and to get dirty with their team and help resolve conflict. Help to constantly listen to customers, so they're not too far away from the problem. And that's an approach that I think has been really important since I've been at a much smaller company. It's really humbling to go from a much bigger company where it's managing a pretty big P&L to something where you're literally creating stuff from scratch. It's also a lot of fun. So I'm having a great time, but it's also it's also challenging to do as many things as possible with constrained resources. So that's
focus is key for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
Danny, I'm curious. Maybe just shifting gears a little bit. We've gotten to know you a lot, and I think Larry and I both think of you as a strategic thinker and a creative thinker, and it's really been inspirational to see what you've done with TOGO. I'm just curious, what else inspires you? What are you seeing out there? Maybe there's a brand or a business that you look at and you say, they're getting it right. Is there anything that you come back to and that you refer to in the day-to-day with your team to inspire them, maybe that you could inspire our viewers with?
Yeah, I look for inspiration in a bunch of different things that I use on a daily basis, or in my own kind of trip planning, particularly in travel. Obviously, to call out some companies that I really admire. I think the companies I admire have a really keen eye for design. And I'd say that not just the graphic design, but the way that their tools kind of make you feel with the experience. And that's something that I'm trying to preach more and more to my team. I don't always think we do the best job at it, but we're working on it. So I look at companies, obviously, like Airbnb, which has really invested right from the start in design thinking and in trying to make people that come to the site feel a certain way about their product offering. There's some smaller apps that I use when I travel, like All Trails, which is I have no affiliation to All Trails. I just think it's a beautifully designed app, and it's a really great service. When you're going offline, you download everything that you need, and it's just very easy to find what you need. So I cook a lot. There's an app that I'm using these days called Yumly, which I think is a terrific personalization engine, and I'd like to incorporate more of those concepts in what we're doing as well. So we're constantly looking, and we have kind of our own kind of pin board of things that we admire about certain other companies, and we try to bring in the best of those elements over time to our office.
I've noticed you're on a hiring tear. We see a lot of posts in LinkedIn about trying to bring in new folks. Are you any advice to anybody if you're they get an interview with you? What you look for in new talent?
Well, as a startup, we look for people with I would say a high bias for action, people who are action oriented, but not just taking action for action's sake. They're actually thinking before they act. They take responsibility for their actions. We're okay with making mistakes, so it takes a certain amount of kind of a risk taking person. I think it's also important to have some connection to the work that we're doing, and to feel like you want to make the outdoor space a little bit better than you found it. We have this great opportunity to use our platform to help not just make sure that this finite resource is around for future generations, but also expand the pie of who's using it. Make it more diverse, more welcoming. So people who are passionate about that, I think are folks that we'd like to talk to. And people who are okay with a little bit of ambiguity and a pretty fast-paced culture. That's what we're trying to build.
Terrific. Well, everybody go and download the TOGO app. Check out the company. Danny, I want to thank you. We're kind of at the top of the hour. Thank you so much for joining us. Dave Burse, your usual guest, will be back on Tuesday along with Eric Jochimsthaler, our CEO. And they're going to be actually having a conversation with Bruce Daisley, who is the former European vice president for Twitter. So that should be a very interesting conversation as well. And again, Danny, thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Everyone.